Mockery is easy when the sun is shining. 72-year-old Victor Marshall endured 3 years of relentless taunts, nicknamed the Mole Man for burying his life savings in the dirt. But when a record-shattering bomb cyclone plummeted temperatures to 40 below, those same mocking neighbors came begging at his subterranean door. Ridgefield, Montana, was a town built on vast, windswept plains, where property lines stretched for miles and the aesthetics of a man's home dictated his social standing. In the heart of this sprawling, high-country elite enclave stood the property of Gregory Higgins. Gregory was a prominent real estate developer who had just completed a 6,000-square-foot modern marvel of glass, steel, and vaulted ceilings. It was a monument to wealth, dominating the horizon. Directly adjacent to Gregory's sprawling estate was a 10-acre plot purchased by Victor Marshall. Victor was a retired geotechnical engineer, a widower who had spent 40 years designing foundations for skyscrapers and deep earth storage facilities. When he moved to Ridgefield, people expected another sprawling ranch or a tasteful log cabin. Instead, Victor brought in a fleet of heavy excavators and started ripping a massive gaping wound into the earth. He wasn't building a basement. He was building a tunnel. For months, the town watched in a state of bewildered amusement as Victor buried massive corrugated steel culverts, the kind used for highway drainage, deep into the hillside. He coated them in a thick, rubberized waterproofing membrane, layered them with polyurethane insulation foam, and then buried the entire structure under 8 feet of compacted topsoil. From the surface, Victor's home looked like an overgrown burial mound. Only a heavily reinforced steel door set into a concrete retaining wall and a series of strange periscope-like ventilation pipes gave away that someone lived beneath the grass. The mockery began almost immediately. At the local diner, over steaming cups of black coffee, the townspeople relentlessly tore into Victor's project. "Did you see the Mole Man today?" Gregory Higgins would laugh, holding court in a leather booth. "Property values are going to plummet. He's living in a glorified sewer pipe. I told my wife Clara to make sure the dog doesn't accidentally dig up our new neighbor." The jokes quickly turned into a hostile legal crusade. Gregory Higgins, infuriated that his floor-to-ceiling glass windows looked out over a lumpy patch of dirt instead of a manicured neighboring estate, decided Victor had to go. He enlisted the help of Brenda Walsh, the fiercely ambitious head of the Ridgefield Zoning Board. Brenda began issuing citation after citation. She claimed the underground structure violated community aesthetic guidelines, structural safety codes, and proper ventilation protocols. Victor quietly fought every single notice. He appeared at town hall meetings, armed with binders of thermodynamic physics, structural load calculations, and obscure state statutes regarding earth-sheltered homes. The earth, Victor calmly explained to a room full of sneering locals, is the ultimate thermal battery. At 10 feet below the surface, the temperature remains a constant 55 degrees year-round, regardless of what the weather is doing above. I don't need a massive furnace. I don't need air conditioning. And when the wind howls, my house won't even shudder. Brenda Walsh slammed her gavel. "Mr. Marshall, we don't care about thermal batteries. You are constructing a hazard and an eyesore. We are drafting a demolition order." The legal battle dragged on for 2 years. Victor lived quietly in his tunnel, meticulously finishing the interior. He installed a state-of-the-art air exchange system, a massive masonry heater that required only a handful of twigs to warm the entire space, and a subterranean greenhouse illuminated by fiber optic solar tubes that funnel natural sunlight down from the surface. Meanwhile, Gregory Higgins threw lavish winter parties, cranking his massive propane furnaces to the maximum to combat the freezing drafts that invariably leaked through his massive aesthetic windows. He installed a massive computerized smart home generator to ensure his kingdom never lost power. The town of Ridgefield thought they had conquered nature with money and technology. Victor knew better. Nature could not be conquered, it could only be accommodated. The warning came in mid-January. Meteorologists began frantically tracking a weather anomaly plummeting south from the Arctic Circle. They called it a generational bomb cyclone, a catastrophic convergence of low pressure, hurricane force winds, and temperatures that defied human comprehension. Ridgefield was directly in the crosshairs. "Nothing to worry about," Gregory told his wife Clara as they watched the heavy gray clouds roll over the plains. "We have the generator. We have a smart thermostat. We'll ride it out with a glass of Merlot." At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, the storm hit. It didn't arrive as a gentle snowfall. It struck like a physical wall of white. The wind was clocked at 95 miles per hour. Within 20 minutes, visibility dropped to zero. The temperature plummeted from 20 degrees above zero to 40 degrees below in a matter of hours. With the wind chill, the air outside was a fatal negative 70 degrees. 30 minutes into the blizzard, Ridgefield's electrical grid violently collapsed. Transformers exploded in showers of blue sparks, instantly swallowed by the whiteout. In the Higgins mansion, the lights died. Gregory confidently marched to his utility room, waiting for the massive smart generator to roar to life. It sputtered, coughed, and died. He checked his phone. No signal. He braved the howling wind for 30 seconds to check the outdoor unit, only to discover the horrific truth. The 90-mile-per-hour winds had driven freezing moisture directly into the generator's intake valve. The fuel lines were frozen solid. The multi-thousand-dollar machine was a useless block of ice. Panic set in. With massive glass windows covering the northern face of the mansion, the house possessed zero thermal mass. It was bleeding heat at a terrifying rate. Within 3 hours, the interior temperature of the multi-million-dollar home had dropped to freezing. Clara and their 10-year-old son, Leo, were huddled under every blanket they owned, their teeth chattering violently. Frost began to form on the inside of the spectacular vaulted windows. Soon, the unmistakable sickening sound of internal plumbing bursting echoed through the walls. Gregory Higgins, the man who had mocked the dirt, realized his family was going to freeze to death in their own living room. 4 miles away, on the adjacent interstate highway, Brenda Walsh was facing her own nightmare. She had ignored the early warnings, trying to make it home from a county meeting. Her luxury SUV had hit a snowdrift, spinning off the road and burying itself into a massive embankment. The engine had died. The snow was piling up over the windows, sealing her in a dark, freezing coffin. Her phone displayed no service. She honked the horn, but the sound was completely devoured by the roaring wind. As the cold seeped into her bones, she realized the terrifying reality of the plains. No rescue tow truck was coming in this weather. Back on the ridge, Gregory Higgins made a desperate decision. He bundled his wife and son in every layer of clothing they possessed. "We have to go next door," he yelled over the howling drafts inside his home. "To the dirt hole?" Clara cried. "It's a quarter-mile away. We'll die in the snow. If we stay here, we die," Gregory screamed. They tied themselves together with a heavy extension cord, a desperate lifeline in the blinding whiteout, and stepped out the door. The cold was a physical assault. It felt like breathing in broken glass. The 90-mile-per-hour wind repeatedly knocked them off their feet. They crawled blindly through the waist-deep snow, moving only by the memory of where Victor's property line lay. Just as Leo began to go limp, unable to take another step, Gregory crashed into a heavy steel pole protruding from the snow. It was one of Victor's ventilation shafts. Gregory dropped to his knees, clawing at the snow until he found the concrete retaining wall, and then the heavy steel door. He pounded on it with his frozen, numb fists, screaming into the wind. The door swung inward. A wave of golden light and astonishing, miraculous heat washed over them. Victor Marshall stood in the doorway, wearing a light flannel shirt and sipping a mug of hot tea. He looked at the shivering, ice-caked family, stepped aside, and gently said, "Get inside quickly. You're letting the wind in." Gregory dragged his family over the threshold, and Victor sealed the heavy vault door behind them. The roaring of the storm was instantly severed, replaced by an absolute cathedral-like silence. The Higgins family collapsed onto a warm brick floor. As their vision cleared, they stared in absolute awe. Victor's home wasn't a damp sewer pipe. It was a breathtaking feat of engineering. The long, cylindrical steel walls were clad in beautifully finished cedar panels. The air was rich, smelling of damp earth and blooming flowers. A massive masonry stove in the center of the room radiated a deep, bone-soaking heat. Because the earth around the tunnel blocked the violent winds and insulated the structure, Victor was easily maintaining a temperature of 72 degrees, using only a few pieces of scrap wood a day. In the back of the tunnel, illuminated by the soft glow of battery-powered LED strips and fiber optic tubes, a lush indoor garden was thriving. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vine. "My God," Gregory whispered, weeping as his son stopped shivering. It's a paradise." "It's just physics, Gregory," Victor said softly, handing them warm towels he had kept by the stove. "The surface is a volatile place. Down here, the earth protects her own." But Victor wasn't done. "I need your help, Gregory," Victor said, turning toward a heavy metal hatch set into the floor at the far end of the tunnel. "What is it?" Gregory asked, still trembling. "When I built the drainage culverts," Victor explained, "I laid an auxiliary pipe that runs 400 yards under the property line, terminating right near the embankment of Interstate 80. It's a passive geothermal loop, but it's large enough to crawl through. I've been monitoring the seismic sensors I placed near the road. A heavy vehicle crashed into the drift above the exhaust vent an hour ago. Someone is trapped out there, Gregory." The man who had tried to destroy Victor's life didn't hesitate. "Show me." The two men descended into the dark, narrow sub-tunnel. Armed with flashlights and heavy pry bars, they crawled for hundreds of yards beneath the frozen, deadly surface of the earth. When they reached the end, Victor popped the heavy steel grate. They dug upward through 4 feet of packed snow, breaking through right beside the buried tires of a luxury SUV. Inside the freezing, darkened vehicle, Brenda Walsh was slipping into unconsciousness. She thought she was hallucinating when a muffled tapping hit her floorboards. Suddenly, the snow beneath her passenger door collapsed, and the face of the man she had spent 2 years trying to evict appeared in the darkness. "Councilwoman," Victor said, his voice echoing from the tunnel below. "Care to come in out of the cold?" The storm raged for 3 continuous days. The town of Richfield was brought to its knees. Over 40 homes suffered catastrophic structural damage. Millions of dollars in plumbing and interior finishes were ruined by burst pipes. Up beneath the frozen mud, 5 people rode out the disaster in total comfort. They ate fresh tomatoes from the subterranean garden. They drank tea brewed on the masonry heater. They played board games in the deep, unshakable silence of the earth. In those 3 days, the arrogance of the surface world was entirely stripped away. When the winds finally died down and the snowplows began to clear the roads, Gregory, Clara, Leo, and Brenda emerged from the heavy steel door into the blinding white light of the devastated surface. Gregory looked back at the unassuming mound of snow that covered Victor's home. He then looked at his own mega mansion in the distance, its glass shattered by flying debris, its interior completely destroyed by ice and water damage. The town council held an emergency meeting a week later. The first item on the agenda was brought forward by Councilwoman Brenda Walsh. The demolition order for Victor Marshall's property was completely revoked. In its place, the council drafted a new initiative asking Victor to consult on a resilient infrastructure project for the town's emergency shelters. Gregory Higgins, eating a massive financial loss, quietly began drawing up plans for his next home. It wouldn't have massive vaulted windows. It wouldn't rely on a fragile smart grid. He was looking into corrugated steel culverts. Victor Marshall remained exactly where he was. He went back to reading his books, tending his underground tomatoes, and enjoying the absolute quiet. He had proven his point without ever raising his voice. He had let the wind do the talking. And from that winter onward, nobody in Richfield ever laughed at the mole man again. Victor's underground sanctuary proves that nature isn't something to conquer, but something to work alongside. When the grid fails, true innovation survives. Did this tale of subterranean survival leave you inspired? Hit that like button, share this video with your fellow off-grid dreamers, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life survival stories. Don't get left out in the cold. Join our community today.